Spring training is up and running for most baseball teams, at least the pitchers and catchers reported. Of course, you have some of the teams like the Toronto Blue Jays who are wondering who's going to be there for R.A. Dickey. Of course, he's had JP Arancibia, Dino Navarro, who looks like he wants to get out. And now they have Russell Martin, who paid a lot of big cash for, who they paid a lot of big cash for. But can he be the guy to catch that knuckler? He was trying. That's definitely the first couple of days he was trying. Could this be a match made in heaven, or is this going to be a complete failure for the Blue Jays once again?
I think it's going to be a failure, just like bringing Martin in is going to be a failure. I think you had a catcher that batted, what did Navarro hit, 300 last year? Yeah. And was above average defensively, or average defensively at least. And Martin's a little bit over the hill. I'm not convinced that this is a great move across the board, let alone for R.A. Dickey.
And if that's the case, then when do you give up on R.A. Dickey? I know he's such a great pitcher and everyone loves him, but if you can't have a catcher and every fifth game you have to put a plug in to catch for him, if you can't hit and can't do much else, when do you finally say, okay, we can't do this anymore? It's wrecking the quality of our team overall. It's not about one player. It's about what you can do as a team. And every fifth game, you're having to put someone in your lineup, taking the flow out of your lineup. Like, that to me is...
Well, the advantage of being in the American League is that you could have that DH. So, for example, if you do have Russell Martin hitting a hot bat, you don't necessarily take him out. You put him in a DH spot, bring in the guy who has to fill in that role, whoever the backup catcher is that they have for, say, RA. But I don't think that's what they're looking for. They want an everyday guy who's going to be in the lineup, who's going to provide some pop, and a guy who could catch. They don't want to just be like every fifth day they're going to have to wonder who's going to be the catcher for R.A. Dickey. And I don't know. My thing is, I'm worried more so about Russell Martin being injured than I am him catching that knuckler. But what do you say about R.A. Dickey now? Like, does R.A. Dickey still have enough to go through as being your number one ace?
Well, I don't think he's been an ace since the Cy Young year. I think he's been above average everywhere but in Rogers Center. Every time he's on the road, he seems to do pretty well, but in the Rogers Center, it doesn't seem to go so well.
So that, again, goes back to my point of when you give up on him and try and get something else to fill in, not just because then you can now get a better catcher who's not supposed to be a knuckleball catcher, and you get a pitcher who can now maybe be that next level pitcher. You're helping your lineup as a whole. If it doesn't work out soon, trade them both or trade one. You got to do something. You can't have two guys in your lineup that are kind of wrecking the flow of your pitching staff and wrecking it on your batting side too.
It's close. Spade pitching staff hasn't been that great anyway,
No.
so it's
right.
Not really wrecking it.
Well, you know who hasn't been great? The Toronto Raptors as well. They lost 5 in a row, finally snapped that against the Philadelphia 76ers, but who's kidding? I think all of us can beat the 76ers at this point where they're at. But if you look at where Toronto is right now, ever since that great start that they had to begin the year, they're 18-16. They're really just a 500 team. Mm-hmm. And they don't have their main guy in terms of Kyle Lowry. Does this mean that Toronto, the Raptors, should push that panic button and be worried?
I wouldn't be too confident right now. The East isn't that strong overall, and the Dinos are, like you said, playing 500 basketball. And if you look at this team, I think they overachieved for a good chunk of the first term. But I just don't think there's enough guys there that can get it done at the next level. Now, the East might allow them to get to the second round. I just don't see them getting past the second round.
Well, you're losing to the guys like the Knicks, as you'll see there. That's going to be tough. If you can't make to the basket and you're giving a guy like Andre Bargnani time in the key and he's making those fadeaways, you're in trouble. I seriously think this is a concern for a team, regardless if they're in the Eastern Conference, because there's no real team that you could say that they could beat. Maybe Milwaukee. What happens if they drop down? Milwaukee, okay. The Bullets? Or not the Bullets. The Wizards. There we go.
Same thing. That team's pretty solid. They don't beat them.
Can they beat them? No. And they're not going to touch Chicago.
No.
They're not going to touch any of the other teams right now. You're seeing Cleveland.
No.
Where can they go? Andrew.
They're going to stay where they are. I'm not a panic button person, because I think like you have that great of a start to a season, then you kind of drop out. It's like it's expected to happen. It's like you can't, when you magnify the beginning part and look at the middle, of course you're going to find problems. There's injuries, problems with some of their best players. That's going to cause a lot of issues in your lineup. So they have that comfort. Maybe that's also a little bit too. They have like a 12-game lead in their division. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry too much because you have that at least a top 3 playoff spot practically wrapped up. So I think when it gets more closer to playoff time, when matchups start actually mattering, then we'll maybe start worrying a little bit more.
Scoring depth is a concern for them.
And that's something that's going to see if they can remedy They could have during the trade deadline. That didn't happen.
Lost
How
to
about
the
this?
Knicks. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big headache. More to this is a serious note. Moving on to Major League Baseball and Josh Hamilton. Hamilton has been suspended indefinitely or is out indefinitely in terms of suspension. This is a little touchy subject because, of course, he's had issues, personal demons, regarding substance abuse. Recently, there are talks that cocaine and alcohol again resurfaced, and this is a guy who's struggled. This is something that's not a laughing matter, and he's been suspended for 2 years from baseball because of this. When in the early 2000s, as a member of the Tampa Bay Rays, he's going to be facing his third strike. How lightly should Major League Baseball tread when it comes to giving him a lengthy suspension, if they should give him a lengthy suspension?
I'm assuming they have policies and procedures in place to help players with that. I know with Hamilton's case, he actually has a guy hired to be with him at all times to keep him away from those things. Now, I don't know if that didn't happen when the issue took place, but he's had this since he was drafted. This is obviously a problem, a mental health problem. But there is stops and checks and balances in place. And MLB baseball, if he's gone through the proper channels, I don't know if he's suspended without pay or how you do it. We get in that mess that the NFL got into this year. So he probably should have been addressed.
Oh, you have to. This is treading lightly so much because it is more of a mental problem. It's not like he's taking this to get better at baseball. He's taking this because it's a disease in himself. So,
and it's ruined a lot of not just baseball players, professional athletes,
Elite athletes, yeah.
even just the regular people on the street.
And it's hard because they're going to take him. He's going to get suspended. He's going to be taken away from the game. And when he's in the game, he's not doing that stuff as much or not around it because he's concerned in baseball. He's in the park. He's with the boys, and it's.
They have something to focus on.
Yeah, and so if you take him out, now you've really got to start thinking about Josh Hamilton, the person, more than the ball player.
Very quickly, is this the end of Josh Hamilton as a baseball player?
I think so. We saw his demise the last couple of years. I think this is probably the end of him or near the end.
Andrew?
Yeah, got to say so. Can't come. He's got to focus on Josh Hamilton, not the baseball player, the person.
All right. He's also going to be turning 34 in May, so you look at that as a factor. That could be an issue. Thanks, guys. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we return, we got Over Under coming up next.